I think about death every day.
In what ways?
Like, I could die today, I could lose one of my dogs today, I could lose a family member today. Shit could get real today.
Are you afraid of it?
Mm-mm.
This morning in Hillsborough County, 3 people accused of killing rapper
Julio Foolio.
Julio Foolio.
Rapper Julio Foolio.
Julio Foolio
Shot 31 times.
Police are still looking for the person who shot and killed a rapper, Julio Foolio.
June 23rd, 2024. Tampa, Florida. 4:40 in the morning. A 26-year-old rapper steps out of a hotel after celebrating his birthday. Within minutes, over 30 shots ring out. This is the story of how one of Jacksonville's most controversial rappers met his end, and how a decade-long feud finally claimed its most famous victim. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most tragic stories in hip-hop this year. This is the story of Julio Foolio, a talented artist whose life was cut short by the very streets he rapped about. This isn't just about one night in Tampa. This is about years of pain, loss, and the beef that turned Jacksonville into one of the deadliest cities for rappers in America. So let's talk about who Julio Foolio really was. Charles Andrew Jones II, known to the world as Julio Foolio, was born on June 21st, 1998, in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you know anything about Jacksonville's rap scene, you know it's different from anywhere else in the country. Foolio grew up in the north side of Jacksonville, specifically in an area known as 6th Block, off Moncrief Road. This neighborhood would define everything about his life, and ultimately his death. From a young age, Charles was immersed in street life, but he also had something else, raw talent. By his late teens, Foolio was building a name for himself in Jacksonville's underground rap scene. His music was aggressive, unfiltered, and deeply personal. He rapped about real experiences, losing friends to violence, growing up in poverty, and the constant threat of death that hung over his neighborhood. Songs like Crooks, Voodoo, and When I See You put him on the map locally. But what really got people's attention nationwide was his willingness to be completely unfiltered. Foolio didn't just rap about street life. He called out his enemies by name, taunted rivals, and documented the ongoing war between Jacksonville's gangs in real time through his music and social media. By 2020, Foolio was gaining serious traction. His YouTube videos were getting millions of views. Major blogs were covering him. He had a real shot at making it out. But there was one problem. He couldn't leave the streets alone, and the streets wouldn't leave him alone either. Now, to understand what happened to Julio Foolio, we need to understand the war that had been raging in Jacksonville for over a decade. This wasn't just rap beef. This was real gang warfare that had claimed dozens of lives long before Foolio ever picked up a microphone. The conflict centered around 3 main groups: 6th Block, where Foolio was from, and their rivals. ATK, which stand for Ace's Top Killers, and 1200, also known as KTA or Kill Them All. These weren't just gangs. There were entire neighborhoods locked in a cycle of retaliation that went back years. The beef had roots in personal disputes, territorial conflicts, and most importantly, bodies. Every time someone was killed, the retaliation was inevitable. And in Jacksonville, rappers weren't just documenting this violence. They were active participants. On the ATK side, you had rappers like Yun Gen Ace, Foolio's most prominent rival. Ace had lost his brother and close friends to gun violence. In January 2018, Ace himself survived a shooting that killed his brother Trey D and 2 friends, 23, Royale, and 3. That shooting changed everything. Foolio and Ace's beef became the most visible part of this larger war. They dissed each other constantly. Foolio released When I See You, directly targeting Ace and celebrating the deaths of his friends. Ace responded with his own diss tracks. Every song was gasoline on an already raging fire. But here's where it got really dark. These rappers weren't just making diss tracks. They were documenting everything on social media. Instagram live sessions where they'd mock dead rivals. Videos shot at crime scenes. Foolio became infamous for his disrespectful posts, including photos of the graves of deceased enemies and celebrations after rival gang members were killed. One of the most controversial moments came when Foolio made posts mocking the death of ATK members. He also celebrated when other rivals were killed, posting dancing videos and taunting messages. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. This was psychological warfare. The violence was relentless. Between 6th Block, ATK, and 1200, dozens of young men were killed over the years. Each death led to another retaliation. Friends of Foolio were murdered. Members of rival gangs were killed. The cycle never stopped. Foolio himself survived multiple attempts on his life. He was shot at in 2021 while in his car, hit in the foot. In 2023, there was another shooting. He knew people were trying to kill him, and yet he couldn't or wouldn't stop the provocations. By 2024, Julio Foolio was 26 years old and at a crossroads. He had achieved real success in the rap game, millions of streams, a loyal fan base, and legitimate opportunities. Some people close to him were urging him to leave Jacksonville, to stop the disrespecting, to just focus on the music. But leaving isn't easy when you spend your whole life in a war, when you've lost friends, when you've made enemies who will never forget. June 21st, 2024, was Foolio's 26th birthday. He decided to celebrate in Tampa, about 2 hours away from Jacksonville. Maybe he thought the distance would keep him safe. Maybe he wanted one night to just celebrate being alive. He rented an Airbnb and started partying with friends. The celebration was documented on social media. Foolio and his crew enjoyed themselves, seemingly without a care. But here's where things went wrong. Tampa police were called to the Airbnb because the party had exceeded the property's occupancy limit. Foolio and his group were asked to leave. They relocated to a nearby Home 2 Suites hotel on McKinley Drive. It was now early morning, June 23rd, just after 4 a.m. What Foolio didn't know was that his location had been tracked. His social media posts, his movements. Someone was watching, and that some people was on their way. At approximately 4:40 a.m. on June 23rd, 2024, Julio Foolio was in the parking lot of Home 2 Suites Hotel. He was with 3 other people. Then out of nowhere, armed men appeared. According to Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkaw, multiple gunmen opened fire with pistols and rifles. One shooter fired more than 30 rounds from a pistol equipped with an extended high-capacity magazine. 2 others used rifles that had brass catches attached, devices used to collect shell casings, suggesting premeditation, and an attempt to avoid leaving evidence. The attack was quick, brutal, and precise. Foolio was struck multiple times. 3 other people were also shot, but survived. By the time police arrived, Charles Jones, Julio Foolio, was dead. He had made it to 26. Just 2 days after his birthday, the streets he'd spent his whole life in finally caught up with him. The news spread quickly. Social media exploded. Fans mourned. But disturbingly, some of his rivals celebrated. Posts appeared mocking his death, dancing on his grave just like he'd done to others. The cycle of disrespect continued even in death. Tampa police immediately launched a murder investigation. This wasn't a random shooting. This was planned. And investigators believed they knew who was responsible. 5 people were eventually arrested and charged in connection with Foolio's murder. Alicia Andrews, 21 years old. Isaiah Chance Jr., 21 years old. Sean Gathright, 18 years old. Rashad Murphy, 30 years old. Davion Murphy, 27 years old. All 5 were arrested in Jacksonville, not Tampa. According to Chief Burkaw, this murder was carried out by rival gang members in retaliation for the ongoing feud. The suspects were connected to the same groups Foolio had been warring with for years. But catching everyone took time. Davion Murphy evaded capture for over 6 months before Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, so what finally tracked him down on January 6, 2025. He was arrested at an apartment on LaBelle Street in Jacksonville. 10 days later, he was denied bond. And here's the kicker. The state announced they're seeking the death penalty against him and 3 other defendants. The investigation revealed that this was a coordinated hit, multiple shooters, planned execution, an attempt to avoid leaving evidence. Just days ago, October 31st, 2025, Halloween, Alicia Andrews became the first to face trial. After nearly 4 hours of jury deliberation, she was found guilty of manslaughter, a lesser charge than the first-degree murder prosecutors were seeking. She was also found not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Her sentencing is scheduled for December 8, 2025, where she'll learn her fate. Here's something important to note. Andrews is pregnant, and prosecutors are not seeking the death penalty for her. But for the other 4 defendants, the state has announced they are seeking the death penalty. This case just got even more serious. The arrest brought some sense of justice, but they also highlighted the tragic reality. More young people's lives destroyed by a senseless cycle of violence. The killers were mostly in their late teens and 20s themselves. Everyone lost. The story of Julio Foolio is ultimately a tragedy on every level. Here was a young man with real talent, the ability to craft memorable songs, connect with an audience, and build something from nothing. He had hundreds of thousands of fans. He had record deals. He had a way out. But he also came from a place where violence was normalized, where survival meant standing your ground, where showing weakness could get you killed. He was trapped between 2 worlds, the music industry that wanted him to succeed, and the streets that demanded loyalty. Foolio's death is part of a larger crisis in hip-hop. Jacksonville alone has lost numerous rappers to gun violence. Across the country, young artists are dying at alarming rates. Killed by rivals, killed by people they knew, killed before they ever reached their potential. Could Foolio have been saved? Maybe if he'd left Jacksonville earlier. Maybe if he'd stopped the provocations. Maybe if there were better intervention programs. If there were more opportunities. If the cycle of poverty and violence could be broken. Julio Foolio was 26 years old. He left behind music, a legacy, and a cautionary tale about the cost of street beef. His story should remind us that behind every diss track, every Instagram post, every viral moment, there are real lives at stake. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.